Good morning, good Monday morning. Welcome to the stream. If anybody's out there listening, please let me know if the audio sounds okay, if you're able to hear the music and me talking, and if anything cuts out or it needs to be adjusted, please send me a message in the chat and let me know. We are working on day 5 of recreating Twitter. I'm just finishing getting set up here. And good. Cool. Yeah. So we left off, this is day 5 of recreating this Twitter. So this was the original, or this is actual Twitter here. We'll just take a look. The actual Twitter page, and then on here is what we've been creating. So we've gotten this part, we built this on the first day, we built this on the second and third days, and then on the fourth day we started working on this what's happening. And so I can already see a few adjustments. Maybe, no, it looks pretty good. The font size, we might want to give a bit more space in there. It looks like it could be, use a bit of breathing room, but we've got this little icon here to add. No, we got that one in. So now we're going on to this who to follow. Hey there, Feet First. Nice to see you. How are you doing today? So we're going to work on this who to follow and then this privacy information, and then, which shouldn't take us too long because we've already got most of that set up. And so then the last piece will, or the next piece after that will be the mobile view. So as you can see on actual Twitter, when we get to about here, it just changes to just the icons. And then once you get so far in, that sidebar just disappears and we don't even actually get access to that. And that's where we'll probably get to today. And then we can look at some of the other pieces, like when you click on this pop out here opens up. So we might, I don't know if we'll get to that today, but we'll see. And that'll be getting into JavaScript. So we've only done HTML and CSS so far, but this will be getting to JavaScript. You're good, Feet First? Yeah, I'm good too. Yeah, had a really good weekend. Got out to the beach, my wife and I, and then had my birthday stream on Friday night for about 5 hours, did some art. You deleted your Discord? Oh yeah? How come? Yeah, it was really nice. Sliced my foot on some shells. And don't even ask, face palms, yeah. Was it an accidental deletion or an on-purpose deletion? So we got this show more, which I need to expand this out so that we actually get that page in there. So there we go. And did that change when it went bigger? No. Okay, so now we're adding, so we've got these and we've got the show more, and now we're adding the who to follow, and it's basically the exact same thing as this. So we can copy most of the stuff and then we just have a different style. So instead of this image or this icon, we've got this follow button, and we don't have a button with that style, so we'll have to create that style. And I won't worry about this icon because that's something specific to this guy, but here's another hover example. And so all of these pop-up things, I think this is another one. No, this one actually goes to a different page, but all of these sort of pop-up things, like this one's just a hover, are created using the same functionality. So there's a couple of different ways we could do it. You could have it so that it's actually created in the DOM and then it just hides and shows when you hover it, or you can use JavaScript to create it and fill the content, which I think is what we'd end up doing because that's typically a better practice. Ouch, yeah, cutting my feet. Yeah, the beach that we went to, it's super nice beach, but it's the water, we were at low tide, and so it was way out, and it looked like a graveyard of clams and shells, and so we walked out to the water, but I definitely had a little bit of a casualty on my foot there. all good. Nothing time won't solve. So we've got this happening, and this is our right sidebar, and then we've got our what's happening. So I think what I'm going to do is just grab the what's happening, this whole entire thing here. And let's just find out if this... so it looks like actually our footer... Oh, this is the footer of the what's happening. So it's actually here, this whole div. And one of the things that I noticed, so we called this what's happening because that's what this section is, but this and this are basically exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is rename this from what's happening. We can still call these happenings because they are specific into here. And we could call these happenings, well, it's a class, so let's leave it for now. We'll do that in the refactoring when we rename certain things. We'll go through it and do a pass of actually cleaning up the code. For now, we'll just leave it as what's happening. So that's the advantage of using a class. If we had used an ID, theoretically we wouldn't want to use the same name, but because we're using classes, it's not a big deal. It's just that it won't quite make sense to somebody who's reading the code, so we'll want to update that when we clean things up. And so we'll change that to who to follow, and now actually we should see that we've got this, it shows who to follow, and these look the same, so we'll have to update this content, but we do want to create a space in there. Is the sound okay there, Feet First, and music and my voice, you're able to hear okay? So here's a new selector that we haven't used yet, actually, the adjacent sibling selector. I don't think we have, but let's take a look at it. We've got our what's happening here. Where is it? Do we have any just what's happening? Or just the... No, so that's the only one. So we've got this what's happening selector. But what we want is to, if we have a what's happening with a what's happening right after it, which is what we have here. So that's what the plus does. That's an adjacent sibling. So if you can do this with any element, if I have an element that directly follows another element, then add something to the second element. So this is saying that if I've got a what's happening and then another what's happening, which we have here, then add these styles to it. So I'm going to add a margin top of, let's say, 1 rem, just 10 pixels. And so then now you can see how we have that space in there. And it doesn't add it to the top of this one. So that's where it's nice that if I was to add just what's happening and add 1 rem, then I'd have 1 rem on the top of this one too, so we'd have to adjust that. So this is only when there's two, one after the other. So now let's update the markup to be more like this. So we'll have a profile image, and it looks like it's got a hover effect on the image, which I don't know if these ones do. Oh, they do too. Okay, so we might want to add that. And that looks like it's just, this one doesn't, but these ones here, there's the hover effect on here, and then there's also a hover effect on the image. And that's where the actual pop-up hover is from, and same with the name here. Ma Shakti, I just realized I still had my party hat on from the birthday stream. Yeah, I left your ability to have the party hat on. I forgot I turned off the party hats on the main guys to save for the next birthday or other event, but I forgot yours was still on there. It's okay. Party hats are acceptable. Stop. What's the stop for? I'm the only person. I don't think you have a party hat, do you? Feed first? No, you're just a little. Well, you got a hat actually. Yeah, so you're. Well, Mashakti does have a hood, so now you two are the only two that have headgear, but that's part of your design. You are the only Link currently, though, and Mashakti right now is the only Mashakti. So we'll leave all these like happening left and happening right, even though eventually we'll want to change those. But basically, we need to update the text. So we don't have any specific meta. We do have, though, and actually in here we might want to do no, I'm going to do it this way. In here we're going to have let's do a happening profile for now. And if you have the time to do it, it's good to kind of have like a game plan of how you're going to name things out. It does get faster as you do it more. You'll figure out ways to name things that make sense. But in general, if you kind of have an idea, when we start to get into, this is just basic HTML and JavaScript, but when we start to use frameworks like React, then that makes it even easier because you're separating each of the components into their own page, basically, instead of writing it all in one file like we're doing here. So the reason we want to do this happening profile is because we need to have the image. So I'm going to give this an image with the source, and this one's going to be the place beard, wherever it is, place beard. I'm gonna give, so the tweet image is that, I'm just gonna grab this one here, and we'll throw that in here. And then beside the image, we will add another div, and we'll add a link to, we'll just create some names. John, actually, let's do feet first. Let's throw you in there, feet first. And then this is a fake, I don't know if you have an actual Twitter. We'll just put a fake Twitter address. At feet first. Not hash at. Just kind of a placeholder, so we'll do that. And then now we can copy this and throw it down in here. Oops, that's the happening right. So this we actually do want to keep like this, but we want to throw a button on there. And then this button is going to say follow. I can't remember what we named our buttons, so let's take a look. Tweet buttons. Is that the only name that we had for it? Tweet buttons.button. So align center space between, gives us some padding, and then a dot button changes our font size. So I don't think we have any any other buttons, so we'll just give this a class of inverted button. Or I'll do it the other way around. So we know that it's a button and it's inverted. And that's just inverted, meaning normally the buttons have blue. I don't think I'm on. Yeah, let's go back to home here. Yeah. So normally the buttons are blue with white text, but the ones over here are white with blue text. So that's the inversion. Com.gov, hey, you're gonna lurk? Cool, no problem. Lurk away. Thanks for stopping by. Nice to see you again. So how was your weekend, Feet First? And so now we have this other happening here, so we can take all of this and throw it into here. And then we'll change this one to Shakti. Placeholder stuff. And that should be good. Then we'll have to get into the styling. So now here's our rebuilding Twitter. So as we can see, this looks quite a bit different, but it's starting to get there. We've got our name and our follow button, and then the show more. And does that have show more? Yeah, so we're the same there. Now we just need to get into the styling. And so we have our happening left is already here, and our happening right is already here, so we don't need to worry about that. But now we need to make our happening profile display flex so that these things go side by side, and then we want these to go top and bottom. You're gonna lurk as well? Cool, awesome. Thanks, Feet First. Enjoy the lurk. So happening left, happening profile. So we need to style our happening profile. So we'll go into here, happening profile. Let's go down to where our happening stuff is happening. And we've got our happening profile, happening meta, submeta, left, and so let's throw that into here. Happening profile, and this is going to be display flex, and that should put these side by side. So we got that. You never liked HTML? Just so you can embrace the clapping. Yeah, is that clapping? Is that what that is? Nice. You never liked HTML? Yeah, it's a simple, I mean, it's the most basic building blocks of everything within the web, so it's hard to get around it. So happening profile, display flex, so we got these side by side, and so let's take a look at this image here. We've already got it round because we gave it the profile, which makes it round, but we actually want to size it a little bit different. So I'm going to look at the happening profile image, and we will give it a width of, let's say, 4.5 rem, 45 pixels. So it's not grabbing it, I don't think, unless it already is that size. It's also possible that the profile image styles are after this in the style sheet, which would mean that it's being overwritten. So let's put important in there. Yeah, so that's changing it there. So a couple of ways to solve this. We can be a little bit more explicit in our selector. So we've got our happening profile, and then we've got an image. So we were saying an image within the happening profile, CSS, make it that particular, adjust those styles to it. But the thing is that the thing is that by specifying happening profile image, when we have a dot profile image, that's going to take precedence over that selector. So if we be more explicit and we say a happening profile with an image that has a style of profile or a class of profile image, that should be more specific. So we can do that by doing profile image. And now this should, there we go. So now these styles are taking effect over and above the ones where it's just a dot profile image. And that's the cascading style, so that's CSS cascading style sheets. That's how the cascading effect works. So we want this to be maybe 3 rem, and we need to do it both on height and width so that the circle looks correct. And I think maybe we want it a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, so it's actually, say, I think our 4.5 idea at the beginning was good. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And so that we'll probably want, let's do a margin right of 1 rem just to push that text over a little bit. And is that going to be enough for us? Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, let's give it a little bit more, 1.5 rem. So there is that. And I think because we're only going to have this particular text, we should be okay to just leave it. If this was going to be bigger, we may want to actually figure out how to how to make sure that this stays there. Actually, it should be okay because it's going to by default be at the top. So now let's specify, let's style our information. So we've got this other div here. We haven't given it a name, so I think I will for profile name. And we'll also add that down to this one so that now we can reference that. We've got our happening profile image, and now we can do happening profile name. And this is good to have happening profile name because I think we've used profile name somewhere else. So this way here we're only adjusting for this particular section here. And I think I'm going to, this is not actually important, but I'm just going to change the URL a little bit so that we make sure and get 2 different images there. And that's just, so by default, this is our URL for generating a image of somebody with a beard from placebeard. But if I run the same URL on the page, it's going to give me the same image here. So it's okay, it makes sense for that to be here because this is the same person that's kind of logged in, me. But then these ones we want to be different. So I've added just a URL query string after it that is different. So this actually doesn't do anything other than tell the browser that this URL is a little bit different. So send me a new image instead of the same one. And so there is that sort of hover effect that we need to do on these profile images, which I think I've given all of the class the profile image. So let's just do that first. And I'm going to find where I've got profile image there and there. So image.profile. So that's how we were selecting it before. Now we can do .profile image hover. And so this is always going to be a cursor pointer because it's always going to be a link to the person's profile. And now there's a couple ways we can do this. The simplest way is let's just try doing the opacity down to like 0.8 and see how that looks. So it does give us a little bit of an effect. It's a bit different, I think, than Twitter because Twitter actually looks like darkens it. It's hard to tell on some of the profile, but this guy here who's got like a white background, it's easy to see the darker overlay. So one way to solve that, I wonder, this is not something I've tried, so let's just see if I give a background color of black on the image, is that going to, no, so that's not going to show through. So I think the way to do this is we will need to, we can probably use a filter. And so filters, let's take a look. we've got these different filters, and I believe that they will work on images. Yeah, so filter, we can do grayscale. What other filters are there? There's blur, brightness, contrast, drop shadow, grayscale, hue, rotate, invert, opacity, saturate, sepia, or URL. So let's just play with this a little bit. Let's try doing a filter. We'll do brightness, and we'll say 0.6, because that's kind of what's happening, is it's darkening it a little bit. Oops, 0.6. And there we go. So that's giving that same sort of effect that is happening on Twitter. And now if we do a transition, and we'll do filter 0.3 seconds, and we'll ease that in. Now we should see that it kind of hovers in and out, which is what happens on Twitter as well. So that's CSS filters. They kind of hover. It's hard to see. It's running a little slow, but it's definitely got a shift in it instead of just a quick change. And I do want to brighten this up a little bit. It's not quite as dark as that. There. So that's good. So now next we need to style these two elements, and they're both anchor tags, so we can adjust those. Now we want them to actually show up top and bottom. This one does. It looks like, so if it's a longer name, it does end the words there. There is a way to automatically do this, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So let's not worry about it for now. We may come back to it. For now, we just need to style the anchors in here as black and dark, so this is similar to the text that's happening in the what's happening, and then the gray color is similar to what's happening up here. So let's find that what's happening, and we're seeing the happening.text, and we've got these styles here. So what we can do, because we want this to be the same as these here, the only difference is it's got that underline for the anchor, but we can adjust that. But for now, what I'm going to do is say in a happening, the, what do we call this? Happening profile? Happening profile, and then profile name. So let's just do profile name, and we want the anchor tags. And now if we come back over here, now they're like that. So the other text was already black, but we can specify this being, oops, black. No, not. And we actually want, the other one will automatically be display block, but let's make this display block. And that way it's going to appear top and bottom. And we want text declaration none. And it's not going to matter affecting these ones here because those, they already have those styles, but it doesn't matter to override them since they already exist with that. Now one thing I want to check though, this display block, did that affect anything up there? No, it still looks the same, so that's good. So just want to make sure that anything that we change in here, if we are adding this to apply also to this, that we want to make sure it doesn't affect anything up here. So now we do need that underline though, so we'll grab this same selector. Hover, and on there we will do a text decoration underline. So it's starting to look a bit better. If we look at this, I think we may want to add a bit more space still. So let's go from that 1.5 to 2. And that's in our happening profile image here. So margin right, we will do 2. Yeah. Looks like maybe a little bit too much room. Let's do 1.8. And this is the fine tuning, like it's down to these 1.8 is literally 2 pixels difference, but it does make a difference on the end. And even that seems a little bit big, so I'm going to go back down to not 1.5, but 1.6. So 16 pixels. Yeah, I think that feels pretty good. And now our second anchor, we need a way to select that. So there's 2 different ways. If we know that there's always going to be 2 links, one after the other, which we do in this particular case, so maybe we'll use that same adjacent selector. And there's ways that you can do this. I could give this a class, this second one a class, or if I know that the profile name is always going to have 2 anchors, I can actually use that same adjacent sibling selector. So where we put that, so we've got our profile, our anchors in here, so let's just put it right after that. And this is our happening profile name, A plus A. And then this ends up being, so our submeta is this stuff here, so I think that that's actually the same style. So instead of putting this, creating its own style, since we know that that's going to be the same as this, let's just add it to this. And we may need to make some adjustments. So actually, no, it looks pretty good. I think it's bold because we've got this font weight here. So let's just set this font weight back to, I think, 500. Let's try 400. Yeah, that looks good. So that's how we can use classes that we've already written. And now if for some reason we wanted to change this style but change this style but not this one, then we would have to move this out of that style. But because we're keeping it the same, it works well to just reuse this particular style. And so the next part is the follow button. So we've got that button inverted. So let's find where our buttons are. .btn. We've got our .btn. And let's give it a class of btn because and I'm going to actually do -- inverted. So this is the block element modifier BEM model of naming, which we'll actually go back through and apply to this afterwards. But this is kind of an example of how this works. So button is the base style, and it's got the main styles, and then button inverted is sort of a modifier. The -- inverted modifies that button class. And that's just a naming convention. There's no actual structure or anything. It's a spec that's been designed as a recommendation for ways to name classes that will make things make sense. So you have your block, and then you have your element within that block, and then you have your modifiers on those elements. So button, btn. Now I need to also add it to the other one down here, btn. And now we've got that showing up like this. So right off the bat, the padding is a little bit off. So, and the unfortunate thing is, so the way to do this that would be better, that I think would be better, would be to get rid of, so we've got 2 different things here. This one here has a lot of padding, the main button has a lot of padding, and the inverted button doesn't have very much padding. So theoretically, unless we want all inverted buttons to not have padding, which I think that's what we'll assume for now, you might want to create a button padded and a button not padded, or explicitly put the padding on these particular ones. But I think in this case we'll be okay to just adjust the inverted button, because it's the only one that shows up on this page, to not have the padding, or have less padding. So we have our, let's put that right after here, button inverted, and in here we're going to say padding 1 rem, 1.5 rem, so 10 pixels on the top and 1.5 on the side, and that looks better. And so I didn't add the button inverted to this second one, or I did, but I didn't spell it right. Button, oh, because I've got the dash, I forgot the double dash. And so the way block element is, you'd have your block would be happening, and then the element would be the right section. That would be how we would do that. So now we want actually the opposites of this. So let's grab this, and we'll make this, we'll just move this down here and see how that looks. So that looks good, except we'll need a border, and we'll need to change the, so the hover is actually the subtle, and we'll need to change the weight of the font. So let's set the font weight to 500, and let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid, and it will be that, our blue color. That looks a bit better, and I think we do want a little bit heavier than that, and I think we have a 600 maybe. Let's check. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now instead of the blue for the hover, we actually want .btn inverted hover. We want to do the background color of blue S, our subtle blue. I think it's blue. Oh, if I put it in right, blue S. And let's see how that looks. Oop. So that's not taking precedence. So what that means, it's because, so we've got our button down here, it's not hovered. This one is, our plain button is taking precedence. So 2 ways we could solve that. Because it's cascading, it goes down through the DOM. One simple way, I could move this down below this, and that way basically the style, because this style is after this style, it's going to take precedence. So, oh, and maybe it doesn't. So because we're actually, so because .btn is more explicit than the button inverted, oh, because it's on the class first. So this is the kind of nuances of CSS, that because I have btn first in this class name, I believe this is what's happening. If I put btn after, then let's just see if this theory is correct. We've got it refreshed. No, so that's not it either. So for some reason, button is more explicit than button inverted. So what we need to do, what we can do is do a dot button inverted, and I think that this will work. There we go. So we do have to actually explicitly say a button inverted that is also a button. Set that background. The other way we could do it is by adding an question mark important. Oops, where did I type that? Important. And this will override the cascade, but it's not recommended to do this. The only time that I typically will do this is if I'm using an existing library and I need to override the styles that I don't have access to. If there's like, if I've downloaded a library from somewhere else and I'm using it and I don't have direct access to the style sheet, then I might use an important to override those styles. But other than that, the best practice recommendation is to not use important, because it does make it so that if you need to make changes further down, it's really hard to make changes because that will always be the style that shows up. The idea is to use the cascade to your advantage. So that's that. Now we've got these here, we've got this hover, and I think that shows up over here as well, and we've got it on this one. No, actually, so that's good. So it does show up here, which I think it does on Twitter here. No, okay, yeah, it does. But this one, it's hard to tell if it does. So the last piece before we do get into mobile styles is just this little footer here, and that's got this here. So this might be an easy one to start with as far as our pop-up menus, but for now let's worry about just putting this in here. And that we can do just underneath here. It's still in the aside, so it's still on the right sidebar. We will just give this, and we'll give this another, we'll call this a footer, and we'll give it a class of right, what did we call the container? Sidebar, so we'll call it Sidebar Footer. So theoretically, if I was using BEM, the block element model, I would do sidebar underscore underscore footer. So that sidebar is the block, footer is the element. And I think I will do that because this is what we will go through and do a pass, and we'll name our classes using this model. And the reason that this helps is, for one, it just identifies elements within, it helps with the cascade, and it makes it more modular. So if I need another sidebar or another component, so that's the thing for these ones here. We've kind of got this what's happening showing up in here. Oh, this is actual Twitter. So I was wondering why this scroll was happening here, and that's something we'll have to look at on our version. But yeah, so with these here, if we have a block of, say, what's happening, or we call this sidebar block or something like that, then we have the element, which is our individual divs within here. Then they're kind of modular, and it just makes restyling or updating the classes in the end later, and it makes it easier to understand this. I go back and forth myself personally on using BEM. I think that it is really good for large scale projects where you might have multiple developers who need to kind of read each other's code. If it's just you, I wouldn't get too bogged down in, definitely name your classes so that they make sense, but I wouldn't worry too much about using BEM on like a smaller scale project. It can create more complexity than it's worth. So in here we've got just a list of links and a more button and an arrow, and then just some text below that. So I'm going to give this, we'll just give that a div, and we'll give this I'm just going to do 8 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that's emit. That allows me to type something like that. So I typed A times 5, and that gave me 5 anchor tags that are scaffolded out like this. So if you're interested in that particular plugin, it's called emit. And now I can do this, and we can enter these in here. So terms, privacy policy, cookies, ads info, and more. And then the more is going to have I this is FAS caret down, maybe? Can't remember. It might be actually FAB. Let me caret. It's only down there, so let's look for this. Angle down, that's what it is. Angle down. Angle down, and I think it was FA. There we go. That gives us that. And then our second div here is just the copyright info. So that is just and copy 2020 Twitter Inc. There we go. So now we can style this footer, sidebar footer. So this is still under our, that's our common, this is our sidebar. So after happenings, let's do our sidebar footer. So we want the font size to be maybe 1.2 or 1.4, not 14. 1.4 RAM. Let's see if that's, no, I think the 1.2 is going to be plenty. We'll give this a padding of 1 RAM and 0, so just a padding of 1 on the top and bottom. I think actually we probably don't even need the bottom, so I'm just going to do padding top. We'll give this a, so there we go. Actually, instead of adding the margin on here, although I think it's a different amount. Is the distance between this the same as the distance between this? It looks like it might be pretty close. So I think I'm going to go back to that what's happening, where we did our adjacent selector, or what's happening plus what's happening, and I'm just going to actually, instead of doing on the margin bottom, or margin top, I'm just going to make margin bottom 1.2 rem. And so that way we're putting a margin below this always. It might need to be a little bit more. Let's just try 1.5 rem. Yeah, I think that works. And so they do actually move it over a little bit so that the text is in line with the text up in here, or these images. So let's give the footer here, let's actually give it some padding. Padding left of 1.5 rem. See what that looks like. I think it's just 1 rem. That looks better in alignment. And so our font size, we've got that. Is that what the font size is supposed to be? I don't really like using like 1.3, but that might actually be what we need. No, let's leave it at 1.2. The color is going to be inherit, so that actually it's not, because it's actually a gray color, so we want to do var gray text. Let's try that one. Yeah, I think that works. So we do need to also say our, so that gives our text, but then also our anchors. No, that's not going to work. So because that's actually then adding padding to all of the, to each anchor individually. So this way here we'll just set the font color, because that's explicit to We don't want to add the padding to all of them. We do, however, want to add a bit of space between these two divs. So in that we can say sidebar. Here's where we can use an adjacent selector. Our sidebar footer, when we have a div plus a div, we want to add a margin top of 1 rem. And that should give us a bit of space between those two. And we don't want underlines on the anchors by default. Whoops, I closed my style sheet. So we can just specify that the text decoration is none, and that won't matter that we're specifying that even if it's not a link. And then we do want a bit of space in between these. So this is just explicit to the anchor tag. And so since we're grabbing this anyway, I can move this into here. And we can say margin right 1 rem. Let's do 0.5 rem. So that just gives us a little bit of space. It's looking a little small, so I think I do want to change the font size to 1.3 and see how that looks. Yeah, I'm not usually a fan of using 1.3s. I like to keep things in the even numbers. It tends to work better, but this is what's happening. So that looks pretty good, and we don't need to worry about these links or where they're going for now, but I think that looks pretty good. So now we can take a look. So here is our see new tweets. We don't need to worry about that. So here is live Twitter. I'm gonna move this so you guys can see it better. My TV monitor doesn't quite, if I full screen it, you can't really see it very well, so because it's a TV, not a monitor. So let's move that down there. There we go. So here is what Twitter looks like, and then here's what we've rebuilt. So pretty, let's even see if we can do a side by side. So yeah, obviously we're not going to be able to do a side-by-side because we have the mobile styling. So let's just go back to flipping. We'll put this here, we'll move this back over to here. So here is Twitter, and obviously Twitter refreshes each time you switch, so, but there we go. So there's subtle differences for sure. We're not going to make it exactly pixel for pixel. And it's not what we were going for. We're actually trying to, I just noticed this search icon's not showing up here, so I'll need to fix that. And I think that was because we were trying to figure out, that's right, that we were trying to figure out how to put that in because we're not actually using the icons. We were using it as a font, which we never actually found the font during the last time. So that's something we'll need to fix. I may even just change the approach and add a div for now to make it simpler. But that's the only piece that I think that I see is left. So from there, what does this? So I'm not seeing the tag down here anymore. I'm wondering where that went to. So let's fix those couple things. We'll fix this tag should be down here and then this icon. But other than that, I think we are pretty good. This tweet button's a little bit thick. And then we'll move on to the mobile styling. So before we move on to that, I'm just going to pause for a minute and head to the bathroom, and I will be right back. back. Okay, let's fix up those couple of things there. So first adding in the tag at the bottom of this piece over here. So that's back to our first file here. Our brand. So that's what I thought. So it does show up there, but for some reason it's not showing up in here. So something's going on that this particular span is not showing up. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on there. Easiest way to do that is to come over into this page and hit F12, and that'll bring up our developer tools. And then we can inspect this element. And so it is there, but the color is so light that it's not working. So that's the reason that it shows up, but it's not there. So we need to change that. That should actually be the color text. So let's find that. This is our profile _ name. So yeah, we started to put some. So it's kind of all over the place. This is a little bit of a mess. Some of them are following this block element modifier, and that's what I have found with using the block element modifier. Unless you are really practiced in it and doing it all the time, it can tend to be a little bit confusing or a little bit extra work. So I think that we'll go through and we'll add that in because it's a really good tool to learn, but it's not crucial to development. It's just a methodology. So in this, we need to find our profile _ name. So let's search for that. Here we go. We got color black, and then our color gray for the span, which is what that is. So I'm going to change this to the gray text. So this is because we had made some adjustments to the colors, but hadn't updated this one. So there we go. So that's showing up now. Next up is the tweet button. I just noticed this is actually not centered. What does Twitter look like here? So yeah, it should be centered. This one actually has quite a bit of padding, and this one has a little bit less. So I'm not sure why this one looks so big. Let's take a look and see what we can find out. So first off, .btn, we will do a text align center, and that should, so I'm not sure why this, because by default buttons should be text align center, so something in here is making this not. So we have a button, and then we have tweet. So button.tweet. Let's see. .tweet. There we go. So we have a width, but it's still showing up not center aligned. So that is really strange. So let's see what we can figure out. Okay. Things have started to slow down for some reason for me here. Okay, so we have our button here, and if we look at the element is there, and down in the bottom here, if I can get it, there. I can move this up and we can see the computed styles. Chrome has all of a sudden gotten really slow on me. There, so we have our text align center, so that should be correct. What is the reason that this text is not centered? I'm going to try, one of the first things I'll try is just adding an important tag to this and see if it actually is styling that is causing this. Important. I'm not sure what's going on. My computer has suddenly slowed down quite a bit. So that text is still showing up aligned left, which is very strange. Let me just try refreshing and see what's going on here. Okay, when in doubt, I'm going to actually just close out of my browser and reopen and see if that fixes the problem. And we are on localhost 8000, I think. So I'm using a program called Live Server, which just allows me to serve HTML files. So within VS Code, I've installed that extension, and I can say right-click, open with Live Server, and then it'll display that page. So it's not 8000. What I'll do to just figure it out is I'll open up a new terminal. We have the first terminal in there, and because it's not doing it on terminal. Okay, so here we go. Port 5500, that's where it's at. So let's open that back up. So it shows down here that I'm running on the live server. Localhost 5500. There we go. And let's see if this is a bit faster. It's definitely a little bit faster. It's still a bit laggy. So we've got our padding, which is 1.5 and 2.5 RAM, our font weight, our text align center. Let's take a look at the code and see if there's anything specific in it that is making us BTN tweet. No. Tweet BTN. No. Oh, because I'm on the wrong page. BTN tweet. There. So there isn't any reason why it should be right aligned. So this is a really strange thing. Sometimes this type of thing just happens. And sometimes this is one of the things that's kind of really frustrating when you're working on a project, because we've spent maybe 10 minutes trying to solve this thing that actually shouldn't really even be an issue. And that gets kind of tricky when you're working with clients and you're trying to make sure and get your work done, but now all of a sudden something's happening that technically shouldn't be happening, and I can't even understand a reason why this would be happening. Important. We were making it center aligned. What happens if we do right aligned? Oh, and it's we've got a display flex. What happens? There we go. So there's what it is. So because we're displaying flex, the dot tweet, and because we've got a dot tweet, we're applying these styles down here. which is this here, and it's overriding this. So we shouldn't have called this button dot tweet because we've got these actual dot tweets. So there it is. So that's like one of the things that sometimes comes up. 10-15 minutes to solve a problem that we created, that I created by naming this tweet and something else tweet. So this is where that block element modifier really works. So in this case, I would do btn -- tweet because that's the modifier, which allows us then, so here's where we've got our dot tweet, and these styles here are all being applied to it. And so it was the display flex that was making it show up left. As soon as it was display flex, it will left align there. So now we need to find that btn again. btn. We don't actually have that, so we do want to make this wider though. So there must be somewhere that we're specifying a dot tweet. Tweet buttons button? No, I don't think that's it. Let's find where we are. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Button dot tweet. Here we go. So this here, I'm just going to take this and move it down with our other button stuff. And with our button inverted, instead I'm going to do dot button -- tweet, and we'll give that the width there. So this now should, there we go, and it's got a better padding on it. So there we go, that looks better. Now let's adjust this button, and this is the main tweet button. So what did we call that one? So it's just btn, so it's just our standard btm, and it's under the tweet buttons. So, and I did see that we had some stuff in there, so let's clean that up. Tweet buttons. So tweet buttons is okay, but then we've got this tweet buttons dot button, and it's got this individual information here. So what happens if we just get rid of that? Are we styling that some other way? I think that actually looks better anyway, so we don't need to override that. I do think that maybe the letter spacing needs to be a bit more. What styles did we have on there? We had the font size, so I think actually both of these styles are probably worthwhile putting onto just the button class. .btn, and that is here. So in there, what did we have? We had, so let's change, we don't need to center because it's automatically by default, and we'll just update it to 1.6 rem. And so that looks better on these ones. Let's pull up Twitter and see what that looks like. So they actually are a little bit more crammed in there and a little bit smaller font. So I think the 1.4 is probably okay. Was this one bigger? No, it's the same. So we'll leave the 1.4, but we'll add in the letter spacing, maybe even a little bit more. 3? Is that going to be too much? Yeah, that's too much. Let's try 1. Or let's try 2. No, I think we'll just do one, whoops, not 12. That's going to be way spread apart. Just the 1 pixel. Good enough. So that's it. That's our rebuilding of Twitter there. That's got all of the structure. Everything is in place to be able to do this. And so this is the approach that I would take if I was designing something. I would build it out like this in HTML and CSS. Then I'd go back and do a pass and clean up the HTML and CSS, which is what we'll do next. And we'll do first, we'll work on the mobile styles. So that's what we'll finish up today with. And then from there, now knowing we've kind of solved all the problems of the display, of the design, that second pass of the code is going to clean that up so that we can identify certain things like this what's happening, where we've got 2 sections that are the same, so maybe we want to adjust the naming conventions there. And then after that, we can go into the functionality of those pop-ups, which is your JavaScript side of things. And once we get into the JavaScript, that's when we would start getting data from somewhere else. So we'll move on from there to actually pulling data from a source. We may use like local storage as opposed to a database. So that's kind of a dummy place that's stored in the browser that allows us to interact with. And that's kind of, it allows you to create the functionality that you need and the components that connect to the backend without having to actually set up the full backend. That way you can solve a lot of these problems. This is kind of the reason that I do this approach is the problem solving approach. So I build the styles and the design to solve the problems that come up around that, so that then when I set up the data structure and the back end, I already know what I need to show on the front end, as opposed to trying to design the back end and then build the front end to it. Both approaches work and might work for different applications or different reasons. Some people might have different preferences as well, but for me, I find building the front end tends to work a little bit better. There are some challenges in it. From a technical side, it works better for me because when I'm trying to show my clients something, this way they can see what it'll look like and they can give me feedback. Because if I'm designing it from a technical perspective, I may have no idea what their actual needs are until they've actually interacted with it, and then they can kind of tell me what needs to be done or what needs to be changed. The caveat or the challenge with that is that then they see this front end and they think, oh, it's almost done, and actually you haven't built any of the back end yet, which is the more complex stuff. So it is then a little bit of a tricky sell to be like, okay, I've got this done, now I need to spend even more time than I already have to actually make it work. Some people understand it, some people don't. So it's definitely a little bit of an education piece when working with clients. So let's get into the mobile style stuff. So the easiest part, let's do it first. When we get to a certain spot, this what's happening just completely disappears. So let's do that first. And so I think I'm just going to do, if I was using Sass, I would put my media queries within the CSS that we're using. And maybe that's another thing that we can do actually too, is take this and convert it into Sass, because that would be more industry standard. But it's good to understand and know CSS before you start to use a pre-compiler like Sass. But so for now, I'm just going to actually write all my media queries at the bottom. We'll keep those. I think my naming conventions have been uppercases here. So we need to look at the sidebar. That's the piece that we're doing. And we want our media query basically. So for anything under no, I have a resizer. Let's go to our piece here. And so I've got an extension that shows me the size. So as I'm resizing up here, you can see up here it shows the pixel width. So what I want to do, does it do it the other way around as well? No. I think for now what I'm going to do is dock this to the bottom. And that way I've got the full... Actually, no, I can't do that either. I need to dock this to the left. And hopefully that will let me, yeah, so there we go. So now we can see basically, now this is going to shrink down because these icons are going to disappear. So maybe we do actually need to do this side first. This is the easiest one to make it disappear. This is a little bit more work, but because we need to know the size of what it's going to look like with this closed, we don't know what actual width we need to set the media query for. So in this case, as soon as everything kind of gets to where it won't fit on one screen, do they change font size? They do not change font size yet. But so this changes to just be this icon here, and then all of the text disappears, and then the button just changes to this quill. Now I don't have a quill icon, so we'll have to look that up. But here we go. So if we take a look, probably around here is where it would be good to reset that. So where did my resize information go? There we go. So right around 1260. Let's say anything under 1260, that's when we'll make this switch. So in order to write that, we do that media screen and max width 1260 pixels. And then we put our selectors within here. So this is just saying anything that is below 1260 pixels, apply these styles to it. So just to make sure that this is what's happening, what I'm going to do is just give the body a background color of black, and that way we can see once we're below 1260 that style's taking effect. And obviously body black is not what we want to do. So here's one of the sort of tricks that is beneficial. So at the beginning we did these resets. We set up our HTML font size of 62.5%, and what this does is sets the HTML font size to 62.5% of 16 pixels, which is what the default browser font size is, which is 10 pixels. And the reason that I do that is because a rem is a relative element font size to the HTML font size. So by setting this default font size to 10 pixels, that means one rem is the equivalent of 10 pixels. So it makes it easier to calculate things. So this is 20 pixels. And why not just put 20 pixels? And the reason for that is that now in here, if we did want to shrink down the font size, or not even just the font size, because I've used rem for most of my spacing around here, I can actually just change the HTML font size to something like 52%. And what that'll do is then shrink everything down relatively. So once we get to 1260, all of the spacing and everything shrinks down. Now in this particular case, I don't think that's what we were wanting to do, but that's the technique that I use in order to give a very, very quick ability to add mobile styling without having to do too much changing or finessing. So with that, we won't do this, but what we will do is we need to get the spans that are inside of our nav. So we've got our navigation, li anchor. So let's do it that way. So we have our navigation, and we have a UL with an li and an anchor inside of it. And then inside of that, there's a span. And we actually just want it to be display none. So once we get down to 1260, it just disappears. And now we need to do some resizing on here as well, obviously. And so that's because I think that our navigation itself actually has a width on it. Possibly, we'll see. Display flex, did we specify a width? No, we don't specify a width. So does our top have a width on it? It does not. So I think it's this button here, the tweet button, that's actually making this size different. So what we need to do is get rid of the text on here, replace it with an icon, and then see where that takes us. So one of the things, in order to do that, our tweet button here, we'll actually probably need to put this into a span so that way we can reference it specifically, and then we will put our icon in there separate. So I'm just going to, let's for now comment. Let's try that and see if that shows up. Yeah, so we want this comment icon to not be shown on mobile. So we've got our tweet and our tweet button. So let's find this class here. And what we want to do is reference our btn tweet and then the I in there, which is actually an SVG, but afterwards because it uses JavaScript to change that. But we'll reference it from the I, and we'll give that a font size of 2 rem, because I think so it's not actually taking the font size. Let's see what happens if we do this and see if that is actually changing it. So it's not. So I think maybe we do need to actually do it on the SVG. SVG. Let's try that. It's not. So one way that makes it easier to kind of figure this out is to just come in and play with the styles right in the editor here. So we've got this FAX16, FA comment. We have that. Let's see what happens if we do a height 100%. No. 3 rem. So it's not affecting the icon itself. So I'm not really sure. We do have an I inside of that. Is that correct? It's an I inside of this. So I think it actually, because it gets changed, it's not going to work. What I have to do is actually make the button font size bigger. And let's refresh. And that's not working either. Button, tweet, font size, 4 rem. Important. Let's see what this does. So I think maybe actually I'm looking at the wrong one. Maybe that's what's happening here. No, it's button dash dash tweet. Is that what I'm editing? Button dash dash Oh, that's why. I forgot a dash. Let's try this again. Let's see if this actually does work. So that does work. I have to specify it on the tweet itself. So we'll increase the font size of this when we are under a certain size. But what we need to do is hide the icon when we're not. So by default, we'll actually have a display none on the I. I think that will work. No, we need to do it on the SVG because it does get converted into an SVG. There we go. So this is above 1260. And then in our media query down here, we do tweet. The span in this case is going to be display none, so that's the text. And then the font size is going to be, let's say, 2.4 rem. Let's see how that looks. Oh, and I have to display the SVG. Display block. So it's not showing up. Why is that? Overflow visible with 1M. Oh. For one thing, this tweet SVG display block. There we go. And the width of this is going to be now auto. There we go. We actually want it to be round, so I might give it an actual width. Let's say the width is... Let's play with it in here, and that way we can see the changes. Overflow visible, this is the button, and we've got this in there. We had the width, we have our width auto, so let's try our width as 2 rem, 4 rem, 6 rem, and let's try giving it a height of 6 rem as well and see what that looks like. Whoop. Height 6 rem. And then our border radius of 25%, or we want 50%. And so 6 might be a little bit big. Let's try 5.5. And 5.5 rem. And we do have a bit more padding on one side. What happens now? We do want the padding. So our icon Chrome is really slowing my system down today. We do want that. But we want this icon to be why is this Do we have a height somewhere else? No. For some reason it doesn't want to take the height, which I'm not 100% sure why. But we do want this to be centered, so let's at this point make this display flex. Let's just go back into our style sheet here because we know that we're editing that. So we want to display flex, and I like to keep my display selectors up at the top just because it makes for a quicker view of what that element is. Align items center, justify content center, and we'll keep our font size there. We'll set our width of 5.5 rem, and we'll set our height to the same, and then we'll make our border radius 50%, and let's take a look and see how that looks. There we go. It's a nice little circle, it's centered, we're all good. So the only thing now, this here must be giving us our size. So in this now, actually all of this can disappear, this icon can disappear, this can disappear, so that we're just left with the circle. So let's just see what we got here. Our profile name is this whole section here, which I think we can just hide. And same with our arrow. So this is our profile container. So let's take a look at our profile container and see what's going on there. Profile container. So yeah, we've got our width 90%. So those are things that we need to override. And in our profile container, we have profile name and this arrow that both need to just be hidden. Profile container, profile name, display none, and then we can also do the same for our dot arrow. There we go, and now that's like that, and now we want just the width to be auto and see what that looks like. Let's try width auto. So because it's display flex, we actually instead want it to be display block. And so we might not even, let's leave that, let's put display block. We'll get rid of the flex on there. No. And so we may need to actually do the same thing where we explicitly say it's 5.5 rem and the height is also 5.5 rem. And so in this case, actually now maybe we will get rid of that. And it's back to being centered, that content. That looks pretty good. If we take a look at our profile container up above, what is the flex on it? Profile container, reflect space between. So we actually want to change the justify content to center as well. And we'll do that back down in here. So we just want to make the justify content to be center, so that way it is centered. It actually looks a little bit off. Let's take a look and see what's going on. So our profile container. Oh, I see. So it's the do to fix this? Display flex, justify content, center. So our image has our margin right, so we need to get rid of that. That's why. Okay, so our profile container, profile image margin right needs to disappear as well. So profile container image margin right 0. Still got that. We need to be more explicit. So profile container dot profile image. There we go. So now that circle is there. So we still need to figure out why this is taking up so much space. And I think that could be to do with display flex. Do we have a width on something? There must be something that has a width. Our top, does it have a width? Does not look like it. Our bottom, does it have a width? Oh, our anchor has a margin. Transition background, 0 margin. So where is that coming from? Display flex, space between. Let's take a look at our original layout and see what we're doing there. So we have our navigation. I don't see any width in there. No width in there. We do have our width here of 90%, but that is being overridden. We put the width auto down below. Contain black gray text, grays. Main header. I wish that my Chrome wasn't making things so. So all of these look like they have margins after. The button here, for some reason there's margins going on that I can't find. So that's what that sort of orangey color is showing, that there's a margin of some sort. So if I hover over here, you can see that there is something on this side creating that space. Display flex. Maybe it's the display flex. No. Oops. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. So something in here appears to be creating space on the right, and I, for some reason, cannot figure out what that thing is. We have our anchor here. Do we have any margin on there? No, doesn't appear so. We have our padding there. If anybody in chat sees the thing that I'm apparently missing, please feel free to point it out. Typically you can select through here and see where it is, but this doesn't even show. It shows that there's a margin there, let's maybe take a look. This is the computed styles, so let's see if there's a margin right. It shows 0 pixels. It actually shows that there isn't any margin. So sometimes that can be from like a margin auto of the parent, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Margin right, so none of these are margins. And so I'm thinking it's something to do with this navigation container. There we go, this flex 1. That's part of it. So flex 1 means that it'll grow to expand, so we actually want that to not be doing that. That's one part of things. And we want this to actually just be this. So here's our aside navigation. We've gotten rid of our flex, so now there's still this space. I think it must be spreading these out, and that's why it's doing that. So the wrapper has a flex. So our navigation flex 1, what do we want to change that to? We can't do a flex 1. Let's see if we do a flex 0. Yeah, so let's change that to flex 0. We'll do that up here, our navigation flex 0. So that solves part of that problem. Now if we get rid of this, oh, because we can't see. So next thing that we need to do, I think our wrapper is doing space between or something like that. So let's take a look at that. What is our wrapper doing? Our wrapper is doing space between. So it's going to push that out to the edges. So that's why there's this space here. It's always going to be right up against this edge here. And we don't want that. We actually want them to be just kind of lined up with each other. So let's change the wrapper. Instead of space between, whoops, we will do, oops, that's not what I'm trying to do. Wrapper, let's try justify content center, and I think that that should make it, yeah, there we go, that's what we want to do. So there we can see that's more similar to what happens in Twitter here. And so then the last piece, now we can actually get the size of where we want to have this thing disappear. So if we expand this all the way out, here's our full screen. Once we get to 1260, that shrinks down. Once we get to, looks like, once we get down to, let's do 1170, and that's when we'll just hide this piece here. And so we'll grab another, we'll create another media query for 1170. And then this one here we need to make our, that's our main, our sidebar. Our sidebar will just be display none. So there we go. So as we come down, this shrinks to that, this disappears, and now obviously there's still what we need to do, something in our wrapper's still making it. We actually want it to be, once it gets to here, I think instead of display flex, we just want it to be a regular div. So let's change this to my microphone. Let's try some things here. Let's see what happens. Whoops. When we get to our 1260, this shrinks down. We kind of want the wrapper to be a little bit more centered. So here's our wrapper. Let's try getting rid of the display flex. So that's not going to work. We do want it to be display flex. We want our width. Yeah, so we don't want to set our width. We want our width to just auto set at that side. So that's the other piece. Okay. So besides doing justify content, we don't want to have a set width, because that set width is what's making it so that it's always going to be that width, obviously. So we actually want this to be width auto once we get down to that 1260. So try this again. We go down. We're shrinking. Come on, computer. Once we get to, okay, I gotta wait for it to catch up. It's a downside to run and stream avatars. It's super fun to have them on, but it definitely makes my laptop work harder. So that looks good. It's kind of centered still. We scroll down a little bit more. Once we get down below 1170, that disappears. And so let's see if we have the same here at a certain point. Oh, I see. So actually, first thing that happens when it gets to here is it actually expands. Is that true? No, it doesn't. That shrinks down, and once we get down to a certain amount, it just disappears. And then we're left with this and this. So our icons are obviously a little bit different. Their icons don't change though, do they? No. It's just the text disappears. We just have a little bit different icons. I do notice that we ought to have a little bit of space between those two. So let's just add a little bit of space to the navigation. Once we get to here, when we do flex 0, we will add a margin right of 2 rem. Let's see how that looks. So again, as we're shrinking down, that looks pretty good. And there we go. So that's mobile styling complete. So that's our finished basic Twitter UI. We've created the entire UI with mobile styling. Next week we will get into JavaScript, so which will include creating these little pop-ups where we're able to open these up, open this up. Oh, this is not a click, I want to hover. That'll show up on hover. And then we can get into actually grabbing data and displaying data that we have, which will allow us to actually type into here and add more tweets. It'll all be dummy data stored in the browser. It won't actually go to a database or anything like that. But the next step from there would literally be, this is sort of the end of front-end development. So once we get it to where we're consuming data, then that would be handed over either to the back-end team, or in smaller teams it would be, you would be doing both the front-end and the back-end. So, but this focus of this stream right now is just on front-end development. So we will take it as far as the consuming data from local storage. And then we'll start a new project after that. And I haven't decided that. So if you have any thoughts on what projects might be good to do, or anything that you'd like to see rebuilt, if there's any other websites you want to kind of review or see built, go ahead and let me know in the chat, or send me a message on Twitter. Go ahead and give me a follow if you appreciate this content, and let me know what else you'd like to learn from a front-end development standpoint. Just going to take a look and see. I don't know if there's any anybody left here in the chat. I think we're good. Only one viewer. I think that's Mashakti. So I don't think we'll do a raid today. I think we'll just end things here. But we made really good progress. We've done the mobile stylings. That's a really good part of that. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Much love.